You're listening to the home of cool, irreverent, and entertaining talk, right here on LA Talk Radio. You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Welcome to The Art of Love. My name is Lucia, and I'm your host and a dating and relationship expert. I'm here to entertain, educate, and enlighten you about love, dating, and relationships, take your live calls, answer your emails, and speak to authors of books which I find interesting. And this week, another interesting book. It is called The Little Black Book of Big Red Flags, relationship warning signs you totally spotted but chose to ignore. I think we've all done that at some point or another. And there are actually 3 authors to this book, but I only have one of them on, and that is Natasha Burton. And so I would like to welcome her to the show. So welcome to the show, Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. A little bio. Natasha Burton is a serial monogamist who is currently the relationships editor of Glow.com, that's GLO.com, a lifestyle website partnered with MSL and Elle magazine. Megan McCrary is an LA-based yoga teacher with an adventurous spirit for romance who has written for a variety of local lifestyle magazines. And Julie Fishman is a sports-playing, tomboy-turned-married comedy screenwriter who teaches at a college in Hollywood and writes for screen, print, and web. The 3 met while getting their master's degrees in creative writing from USC and currently live in Los Angeles. So this book has a ton of red flags, and the great thing about it is it's pocket-sized. You can carry it with you in case you need to look up a red flag on the fly. So, is that why you made it pocket-sized?
Well, unfortunately we didn't have too much control over those kind of things that the publisher did, but we were very excited when they were like, well, we want to round the corners out, we'll make it small, because it really is something that women can pop in their purse, even if you're just reading it on, the subway, or you're reading it at lunch or whatever. It's nice to kind of have it with you, especially if you come across dating disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. So then how did the 3 of you decide to come together and write this book?
Well, it all started actually when Megan and I were roommates, and we were in grad school at USC, and I was single for one of the first times in my life, basically. As you said in my bio, I'm a serial monogamist. And so, she was dating, I was dating, and we would just come home after, various dates with these horrible stories. And we just couldn't believe, we were like half aware of what was happening, that like, oh, these guys are terrible, but then we would kind of continue to date them.
Right.
So we ended up starting our blog, bigredflags.com, and we just started kind of putting stories up. And Julie, who we also went to grad school with, who was, actually had a long-term boyfriend. They're now married. And she, thought the stories were hilarious. She was finding stories from her friends. She was getting stories from her own past. And from there, we just kept gathering and gathering until we had enough stories to where we felt like, this could really be a book. And that's when we, approached publishers and kind of went from there.
Wonderful. So let's give the explanation of what is a red flag. I'm sure everyone knows, but just to make sure.
Yes. So a red flag is where, you're dating a guy, maybe you're, meeting him for the first time, or you're in a relationship, and something happens and you just kind of feel weird about it. Something he says, something he does. And instead of, ask him like, hey, that was kind of weird, or, can you explain more about that? You kind of just shove it away and say, oh, it's not a big deal. Everything's fine. And then one day you realize that that little red flag you saw at the beginning was actually the seed of a bigger problem, and that you should have really just paid attention from the get-go. So, what we're really trying to do with the book and with the blog is to, empower women to recognize these red flags and to ask, the guys that they're dating, or their boyfriends about the meaning behind them instead of just ignoring them or pretending they don't exist and, not really addressing the issue.
Yeah, and also, do you find that some people don't even know that certain things are red flags?
Yes, I think that, I think on the one hand, there are red flags that women don't realize, that maybe, a controlling boyfriend is, he's just really concerned about me or he just loves me. Well, no, he's actually controlling. And I think it's, trying to find the difference between that. And then honestly, I think women sometimes want to hear what they think they want to hear, or they, kind of decide that a guy is a different way than he really is presenting himself because we want to be in love, because we want this guy to be the one. And, we really do tend to overlook things that we shouldn't. And I know I've been there. I know Megan and Julie have both been there. So we kind of come to the book with, a wealth of dating experience, as well as the experience of women who have written into us on our blog.
Yeah, the story I always tell, and I think I've told it here before on the air, of this girl that I knew, and she'd been dating this guy for 7 years, and he beat her up on the front lawn in their 7th year of dating.
Oh, my goodness.
In their 7th year, and I'm like, well, weren't there any red flags? She's like, oh, no, there were no red flags. I'm like, hold it. There's no way he was an angel for 7 years, then one day he totally turned around. And so
Exactly.
And so I, started to question her some more, and then I find out, okay, one time they were out to dinner, and she was somehow the guys at the next table were paying attention to her, and there was like 4 of them, and her boyfriend was ready to beat all of them up.
My.
Yeah, things like that.
Yeah.
So even things like that we might not think are red flags, but then if enough of them show up, then obviously they are.
Yes. And I think, every relationship is different. Every woman is different. And I think, obviously there's some flags like, physical, mental, emotional abuse, which actually we don't really cover in our book too much because, those are types of things that women really need professional help to, overcome. And we are definitely not touting ourselves as professionals by any means, but just women who have been through it. But I think a lot of times, you're kind of going through the motions of a relationship and you're not really, paying attention to things that you need to pay attention to. That could be, I guess a red flag that there's a bigger problem on the horizon.
Yeah. Have you also heard of yellow and orange flags?
Yes. Well, we don't do too much of that in our book, but we refer to them as pink flags, actually, which I think yellow and orange makes a lot more sense, and I'm going to suggest that to Megan and Julie when we talk about these things. But yeah, I mean, there's some things that might be a red flag to one woman, but another woman doesn't really mind it so much. Some women might not want to be with a guy who plays video games, but another woman might be like, you know what, that's the way that my boyfriend relaxes at the end of the day. I don't really care. So I think it's really up to women to understand what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and to seek out relationships that really speak to their values and their needs. And I think a lot of times, we get kind of caught up in, I really just don't want to be single anymore, or, I'm approaching such and such age and I really want to be married, that we don't take enough time to really think about what we want and value ourselves enough to realize that, we can't afford to be choosy and we can't afford to, really find somebody that works well for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure because I don't know if I came up with the term, but I used to have a TV show, local TV show, and I started calling certain flags yellow flags and orange flags. So, I'm not saying I'm the first one who came up with it, but anyways, and so I had these different color flags, and then whenever we discussed different things, depending on what the topic was, I'd raise up a flag. But you can't.
I love that. That is so fun.
Yeah, you can't do that on the radio, unfortunately. But
right.
Yeah, so I just, so I always said, okay, so 2 yellow flags add up to 1 orange flag, and then 2 orange flags add up to a red flag.
And I think that that's absolutely right. I think that, there is this idea of collective behavior, that you have to look at a person as a whole. If, somebody has kind of a yellow flag or an orange flag and it's like, okay, yes, that's a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal. Then if he has 10 of those, I mean, that definitely can be a problem.
Yeah, one time I ended up dating an alcoholic, and I had never dated an alcoholic before. I try to avoid them. And
yes.
And we had a date, and then he calls me up. He's like, "Can you come pick me up because I've been drinking?" He goes, had some guys over, and I've been drinking, so I shouldn't drive. I'm like, okay, fine. And so I go over there, and he was, kind of out of it. So, I walked out because, I didn't think he was an alcoholic, but I thought, well, how rude. We have a date. This is our first date. You're supposed to be trying to impress me, and you're drunk. So I walked out. And then I gave him another chance a few weeks later, and we went to a sushi bar, and this happened to be a sushi bar that did not serve alcohol.
Oh,
one of the few.
That's probably a very good choice.
Well, one of the few. I didn't know, right? But it was fate. And so he's like, we can't stay here. I'm like, why not? He goes, because I have to have beer with my sushi. And so I turned to him and I said, are you an alcoholic? And of course he denied it.
Right.
But of course
Well, I think that that's one of those things too that you just can't. I think for some people, dating somebody that has kind of an issue like that, they say, oh, you shouldn't be prejudiced. You should accept people for who they are. And I understand that. But I think that a lot of times if somebody is either just entering into treatment or needs to enter treatment, that person really isn't going to be good for anybody at that stage. That, that it should be avoided to date somebody that's kind of, going through their own stuff, whether it's, alcoholism or if it's, the death of a parent or something like that. You never want to start a relationship when somebody's in kind of a transitional phase like that.
Right, absolutely. Okay, so let's get to some of these red flags.
Okay.
So you said, there are signs that he doesn't consider you his girlfriend, and one of them is, if you're not sure, you probably aren't.
Yes. This is one of the things that I think really happens a lot, especially with kind of the new, well, it's not new anymore, but this idea of the hookup culture,
right,
where, men and women don't necessarily have to date. This definitely happens a lot in college and, kind of in your early 20s. But, you, instead of a guy picking you up at, 7 p.m. and, taking you out to dinner, it's like, oh, meet me at 10. We're going to this bar. Maybe I'll see you. And it's kind of this non-committal atmosphere of romance, which frankly isn't very romantic at all. Right. So I think a lot of times, women might go on a date or what seems to be a date, but is really just meeting up with some guy at a bar and, go home with him and, oh, he cooked me breakfast in the morning. Oh, this is great. And then he doesn't call for a couple days. Or you find out on Facebook that he, was with some other girl. And I think it's really up to women to make men accountable for this kind of, behavior, I guess, if we could call it that. And, really ask where they stand. I think women can be a little afraid of scaring men away by asking for a commitment too soon. But I think that you're going to be scaring away the wrong men, if that makes sense. That, if you ask a guy for a commitment and he's like, oh, whoa, put on the brakes there, lady, then that's not the type of guy you want to have as a boyfriend anyway. So you might as well just try and scare everybody off and, be with the guy who sticks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then also, it's just kind of like love. If you're not sure that someone's in love with you, then he probably isn't. Because when someone is in love with you, you totally know it. Don't you find?
Exactly. If somebody's in love with you, they are going to be, showing you, not necessarily showering you with gifts or, whisking you away to Paris, but they're going to be emotionally connected and invested in you. And I think that, women really need to look past these kind of superficial kind of idols of romance, the flowers, the candy, the, everything that comes on Valentine's Day, basically, and really pay attention to how a man treats, them. Is he listening? Is he there for you in a crisis? Is he, making time for you and showing you that you're a priority? Those are the things that, women really need to take into account.
Yeah, you just remind me of, a guy that I was dating. I had been for about 6 months, and, really never quite sure what was going with that relationship. And then the day before Valentine's, he was over at my house, and he was sitting at the other end of the sofa. And I started to ask him if he could help me with something late, to come to a store with me later on in the week. And I had barely finished the sentence, and he said, no. And I was like, wow. So I just said, okay, nice to know. And then,
right.
All right, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. Thank you very much. And
right.
And then I tried to, touch him with my toes because he was sitting at the other end of the sofa, and he moved away. And that's
goodness.
And that's when I said, you know what? He doesn't care. It's over, and I broke up with him on Valentine's.
Good. I think honestly, that there's a lot of great guys out there that aren't going to be skittish of being there for a woman, that still believe in this kind of chivalrous ideal of a man kind of, being a man, I should say, I guess, in a relationship. And I'm not sure what really separates the men from the boys in that sense, but I think when you experience firsthand, it's very obvious what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very sensitive to flags, so I don't think most women probably would have broken up with someone by seeing those things. But to me, it's like if you try to touch someone with your toe and they move away, I mean, that pretty much is like, ew, don't touch me, they're saying. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think especially coming after, such a benign request of, hey, would you like to go to this place with me later in the week? If some guy's going to get skittish over that, I mean, I don't even want to know what's going to happen if you happen to have children with him and happen to kind of go down the line and all the other crises that kind of come up in your life. It's, at that point you kind of just have to walk away and consider it's time not wasted, basically.
Absolutely. Okay, so another sign you said he doesn't consider you his girlfriend is he actually tells you he doesn't want a girlfriend. I'm just, and just women do not want to listen to that.
No. And I think that, women often think, too, that they can be the woman to change a man. That, oh, he says he doesn't want a girlfriend, but he'll want me to be his girlfriend. And, that couldn't be further from the case. If a guy is saying up front, I do not want a girlfriend, and you would like to be in a committed relationship, then at that point, women just need to walk away. I mean, there are plenty of fish in the sea. I know that a lot of there's a lot of articles that have come out, a lot of studies saying that, there are no more eligible men and, women who are educated are at a disadvantage and, we're all going to have to marry down. Well, we can't use statistics like that and kind of these, media scare tactics in terms of, that we're going to end up old and alone to dictate our love life. It's like there's going to always be another guy. So you don't have to sell yourself short on somebody that doesn't really want to be in a relationship.
Right, because, even if you do stay there and even if you do somehow manage to drag him into marriage, it doesn't mean it's going to last. So now you've lost, you've wasted 2, 3, 4, 5 years for nothing.
Exactly. And, that's really another thing, too, the idea of marriage. And a lot of these, a lot of relationship books will kind of tell you that, oh, well, if he's dragging his feet, then you need to give him an ultimatum. Or if he, doesn't want to commit, then you really need to kind of, do X, Y, and Z to get him to propose. And that's always been very antithetical, especially to, myself and my co-authors, that if a guy doesn't want to do something, you convincing him to do it, either by some kind of, charming tactics or by, threatening him, it doesn't exactly give you that happily ever after that you want. Sure, you might get married. Sure, he might propose. But if it only came because you were threatening him, it doesn't really mean anything. So I think, we really want to encourage women to take what men say at face value and to go by, trust their gut and to really analyze a man's character and make sure that it's something that they, can trust and that they find is, worthy of them.
Right. Okay, so moving along to another section of red flags, there's the part signs he's treating you like a slut. And one of the signs is he cuts right to the chase.
Yes. I mean, I think that, obviously there are many women that can, go out with a guy, have sex, wake up in the morning, see you later, doesn't think twice about it. She's not, wondering if he's thinking about her. She's not wondering if he's going to call. And, personally, I am not one of those women. So power to him. But I think that, sometimes when women are, trying to kind of get a guy to be something more, they might jump into bed a little bit too quickly. And, men aren't really, they're just wanting to have sex. They're not wanting to create a relationship. They're not wanting to, make anything more than it is. So I would definitely advise women to, not enter into one of those no strings attached relationships with the hopes that strings will eventually, attach.
Yeah, and this is such an easy red flag to spot because, I've met several guys on the net, and, there was one guy that he was already trying to do phone sex on the phone before we even met. And then another guy, the first date, within, the first 5-10 minutes, he's like, oh, I wonder how you are in bed.
And you're just like, who responds to that? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, these men that are out there, like, what woman is going to say, oh, I'm so glad you asked. Let me, why don't we just cut to the chase?
I should have said
it's just not going to happen.
I should have said that. Well, let me tell you how I am. And then tell
him. Well, you must know.
Yeah, and then say, but you're never going to know because I'm out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then another sign is his dick always comes first.
Yes. There are some men that they just, they're not really thinking too much about, your pleasure, your comfort level, and they just are looking out for, their number one. So I think that, women can obviously spot that very quickly. It's, when you're out on a first date and the guy's like, oh, what are you doing after this? Like, oh, you should come back to my place before you've even, gotten the appetizer, talked about where you went to college, et cetera, et cetera. I think that, there are definitely women that are okay with that, and there are definitely women that seek that out. Mm-hmm. But if that's not what you're looking for, then you just really need to be aware of that.
Yeah, I was on this one site, and, I said I'm looking for a classy gentleman, blah, blah, blah. And so this one guy came at me, sexually. And so I wrote back to him, like, what in my profile made you think that I would be interested in that? And he goes, oh, well, women don't say it, but that's what they want.
Yeah, we actually, my co-author Megan and I did an interview with a gentleman that actually had that as his philosophy. He was kind of a relationship coach of some sort, and his philosophy was that, women might say no, but they mean yes. And we were quite offended by that. Not gonna lie. We were like, pretty sure that you shouldn't be taking no as yes. That's just not, not how it works.
Yeah, I think it's kind of illegal if you do.
Yeah, exactly. We were like, okay, we're done with this.
Right, exactly. Okay, so moving on to another section, signs that he's a player. So I was surprised you said he's too good to be true. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that, personally I haven't had a lot of experience with this, but we did have a lot of women writing into our website about this phenomenon where, a guy will just kind of put on those smooth moves that seem like they're, chivalrous, or they seem like they're very gentlemanly, but really they're just these kind of stereotypical motions of what men think that women want. Mm-hmm. So it might be a guy who's just like, oh, sending you roses, or, oh, giving you, these kind of like fake little like love letters that are like, oh, I just love being with you, and oh, you're so great. But he can't really get down to the details of why he likes being with you or why he thinks you're so great. It's all just very superficial surface. And I think sometimes it can be very hard to spot because you feel like somebody's lavishing attention and gifts on you, but it's really the same gifts and attention he could be giving to 10 other women because it's not specific or personal. So I think that's just something to kind of look out for of, a guy who seems like he's, if he's too good to be true, honestly, he usually is.
If he's too smooth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because usually players, they know women very well. They know what they respond to. And, well, that's why they're called players, because they know how to play women.
Exactly.
So, yeah, because, some people might consider me too good to be true, but I'm not a player. Okay, so now the section on sex, for you, if I understood correctly, you said if he's bad in bed. Is that a red flag if someone is bad in bed?
I mean, it is and it isn't. I think that, yes, it is. But I think that there's a difference between being bad in bed and willing to learn, and bad in bed and just caring about, his own needs. I think that, part of being bad in bed, and a lot of what we discuss in the chapter, is a guy who just is completely unwilling to listen to, what a woman's kind of saying, responding to her cues, and is really unwilling to meet her halfway in the bedroom. Definitely, if a guy is not great in bed, that usually can be fixed. But a guy who's unwilling to learn, that can't.
Right. And also, we talked about the hookup culture earlier, which, I think is crazy because if someone doesn't really care about you, then the guy is just going to be trying to get off. He's not going to be caring about whether you are satisfied.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you basically are reduced to a receptacle, and that's not what sex is supposed to be about. I mean, you can have it with as many people as you want, as much as you want. It's not like I wouldn't say that, it's a sacred, thing that only committed couples need to, it's like, oh, fine, go sleep with whoever you want. But, you need to be enjoying the experience. I think sometimes, and I actually read a study about this, particularly about younger women, that, the idea of pleasing a guy is more important than their own pleasure. And I think that that's a very big problem that, young women are falling into because they're not really listening to their bodies and responding to those cues. They're going through the motions because they think that's what a guy wants.
Right. Meanwhile, on the other hand, it's probably like it's the total opposite. They appreciate a woman who knows what she wants, and she's going to make sure she gets it.
Exactly. And I think, and the right kind of guy is that way.
Right. Okay. And then also another red flag for the bed section, the sex section. You said he doesn't understand foreplay.
Yes. I think that, adult men should be aware that foreplay is part of sex. If they didn't listen in high school biology, or if they, haven't heard a woman speak about sex ever, okay, fine. But it's part of the package, and I think that, it is a red flag that if a guy just wants to do a wham bam, thank you ma'am, sex, especially on the first time that you have sex with somebody, I think that that's very telling that, clearly either he hasn't had a lot of sex, which is fine, and, maybe he's willing to learn, or that's just the way that he goes about it. And that could, show a bigger problem. That could show misogyny. That could show, that he's just not very caring. There's a lot that can go with that. And I think that women just need to say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, but don't you find also, I think, guys, they're more aware of women's needs today. I think most guys know that there needs to be some foreplay.
Yes, exactly. And if he's too clueless to not know that, that's an issue.
Right. And then you also talk about bad after-sex etiquette. So what is some of that bad after-sex etiquette?
Well, I think that, to give a couple kind of random examples, but, if right after you have sex with a guy, he pulls out his iPhone and is, playing his words with friends game, it's kind of like, okay, well, thanks, I guess, that was great. I think that, men, just like foreplay, men kind of need to be aware, and they should be aware that women need a little bit of, or most women at least, need a little bit of comfort, not comforting after sex, but need, some kind of cuddling or some kind of affirmation. It's really the bookends of the sexual experience, the foreplay and kind of the aftermath. And I think that, either a guy kind of just zones out in the moment and is like, oh, I'm going to, get on my phone, or I'm going to go check my email or do something like that. It can be really off-putting and kind of, again, to go back to he's making you feel like a slut, kind of make you feel like, okay, I guess my job here is done. Thanks. So I think that, this is something that I think women, if they're feeling that way, need to just be communicative. And this is one of those red flags that I think can be easily reversed. That, if after sex the guy's kind of like, all right, done. Women need to be like, hey, that's not cool with me. Can we cuddle a little bit? Can you not pick up your phone right away? And how the guy responds to that is, going to be telling about the type of person that he is.
See, I wouldn't even go that far. I mean, I just say, let a person do what they're going to do, and then I do what I'm going to do. So if someone treats me like that after sex, and it's like, okay, you know what? I guess he's not that interested, so, why am I even here? Because what's the point of, if I have to ask you to cuddle with me, I mean, you should want to do that. And if you don't, there's a reason.
Right. I mean, especially in the early stages of a relationship. It's like, it's very odd if a guy is just like, okay, well, thanks. And that's really it. So I think that, I think it's up to women to kind of really pay attention to that behavior, especially if a guy doesn't want to stay the night, doesn't want you to stay the night, and it's the first time that you guys have, been intimate. I think that's very telling. And just if there's any changes in his attitude or changes in the way that he's treating you. I mean, I think that, women need to be very attuned to that.
Yeah. Do you think it's a red flag if you have sex with a guy and then he doesn't contact you the next day?
Yes, I do. I think that the way I look at it is that, if you're allowing a man to have sex with you and he just, doesn't call you the next day, it shows that he doesn't really value the experience in some ways. I mean, sure, some guys can be absent-minded. Some guys can get busy. They can forget. That happens. But I think if it's the first time that you've slept with somebody, if you've been on dates with this person, if you've invested time in this person, and he doesn't call, then it's like, well, what else is he going to forget to do? What else is he going to be cutting corners on? It's really a no-brainer thing that every guy should know to do.
Right.
And if he's not doing it, then that's a sign that, there might be some other ways that he's going to fall short.
Right, exactly. A few years ago, I was messing around with someone. We didn't go all the way.
Mhm.
And then I didn't hear from him for 2 weeks.
Huh.
So,
Interesting.
so I didn't get upset. I'm experienced, I'm older. So the next time he came over and he wanted to do something, I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm just not comfortable being intimate with someone that I don't communicate with for 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, that's really it. I mean, I think most women need to have that back and forth, that it can't just be all about sex. There needs to be another component of the relationship, or else, what's really the point?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I mean, he got the message, because maybe someone else, they would have gotten upset and like, hey, well, you didn't call me, and they could have been a big fight. But instead, I just basically laid down the law and told them, without indirectly, that, hey, he was now cut off and there was not going to be any more sex because he didn't contact me for 2 weeks.
Right, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
okay, moving on. Signs he doesn't love you. And this is a big one. He doesn't make you feel special. And women don't realize, maybe because a lot of times they haven't been made to feel special, that he's supposed to make you feel special.
Yes, exactly. And I think, maybe that's a problem with, movies today or whatever it is, but a lot of the, I guess, symbols of love that women get maybe just don't show that there is a very tender aspect to relationships that should exist. And one of the flags that we talk about in this section that really has to do with this idea of being special is a guy who has a lot of female friends who, despite the fact you're in a relationship with him, feels that he needs to kind of tend to their needs as well. And, this isn't to say that, men and women in a relationship shouldn't have friends of the opposite sex. But at some point, we all need to grow up. We all need to be adults. And when you are in a committed relationship with somebody, you shouldn't be, going over to your ex-girlfriend's house to fix her computer. Or you shouldn't be, going out for happy hour with, 3 other girls. Doesn't matter how long you've known them. It doesn't matter how, connected you used to be. But at some point, men and women need to put their partner first. And that's just, the reality of it. It's part of growing up.
Right. And it's not even anything to get upset about. It's like, okay, hey, no, I don't. If you don't want someone that's still in contact with an ex, then you can just say, I'm sorry, but, I don't want to be dating someone who's still in contact with an ex, as opposed to saying, you need to stop seeing her.
Exactly. And some women might not have an issue with it. Some women might be like, you know what? I'm actually still friends with my ex-boyfriend. We're, on good terms. And, I'm fine with you talking to your ex every now and then on the phone. But I think that, both people in the relationship need to make a concerted effort to show the person that they're with that they are their number one and that they're the person that they put first. And however that manifests, that manifests. But it's a very important component to a relationship.
I find that it's the little things, because, if they're willing to do the little things, then they care. Like the story I told you earlier where the guy didn't want to come with me somewhere later in the week. Like I was in Hawaii with the guy, and, I realized I'd forgotten my toothbrush. And it was, 5 in the morning, and he was in bed. Without me even asking, he got up, got dressed, and went out looking for a toothbrush for me.
Oh.
So,
I mean, that is a green flag, I would say.
Yeah, so it's the little things that tell you, he made me feel special, and, he showed me that, he was going to do whatever it takes to make me happy.
Exactly. And I think that, men might interpret this as like, oh, we expect you to go above and beyond. We expect you to drop your, everything for us. But it's really not about that. It's more just it's little tokens of appreciation and showing that you're special. And I think that, women need to expect that, and I think men need to, do that if they're with somebody.
Yeah, but I think if a guy is in love or falling in love, he just naturally does those things.
Yes, and I think that's what the flag is. I think that if a guy isn't, isn't making you feel special, or he's not, even appreciating you for who you are, and is, kind of excited about the things that you bring to the table, then that's a sign that he's just not, not to quote another book title, but he's just not that into you. And I think that, a guy who is really into you isn't going to be indifferent towards you. He's going to be excited about you and the relationship. And, of course, that ebbs and flows over time when you're married or you're in a long-term relationship. But at the very beginning, at the very least, the guy should be, very excited to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the same guy on that same trip, we were on this boat whale watching, and I got seasick. I'm not good on boats. And, we still hadn't seen any whales. And, so I get seasick just when the whale shows up. And
oh my goodness.
And so I'm on the side of the boat because I think I'm going to throw up, and I'm like, hand him my camera. I'm like, take a picture of the whale. And he's like, no, I'm going to stay with you and make sure you're okay. I'm like, no, take a picture of the whale. And he would not go take a picture of that whale. I'm like, listen, next time. I go, so there was nothing he could have done to help me unless he had some ginger ale.
Right.
If I was going to be sick, I was going to be sick. So I'm like, you could have, should have just taken, we waited all that time and we never got a picture. So.
But that does show that, in times of crisis, if you're birthing a child at some point, that he's going to be right by your side. And I think that, women overlook little things like that too. That, obviously not in your case because you could see how special that, that extra effort was. But I think that women don't realize that they can have a relationship where that happens and that it doesn't need to be, the way that it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the grand gestures. It's the little signs. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So moving on, signs he's a control freak. He tells you how he expects you to behave, and I'm surprised at how many women are actually, been with guys who have told them that, and sometimes they actually listen.
Yes. Sometimes, and actually, in this section, I have one of these. One of the stories in here is actually my story,
Mm-hmm.
and I went on a first date with a guy who basically told me before before the breadbasket even came, exactly how the date was going to go. He, told me that he only calls a girl twice after a date, and if I didn't call him back, he would delete my number. And, that was a little scary because I was like, okay, well, we haven't even really figured out if we like each other yet. But now I already know that you're going to write me off if I do X, Y, and Z. And, I'm actually very good friends with this guy now. But if we turned out we weren't a very good romantic connection. So we kind of laugh about it now. But I think that sometimes, there's two sides of control freak.
Yeah.
There's the control freak because he's, nervous or he's, kind of self-conscious or he doesn't really have a lot of, he's not very,
Savvy.
I guess,
Socially
prideful
savvy.
of himself in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, the other one where literally the guy's basically a sadist and expects you to, as he says, when, control freak behavior can come from a very vulnerable place or it can come from a very scary place. And it's, you just have to figure out where it's coming from.
Right. And I also think another form of control, which a lot of people miss, but of course not me, is when someone says, oh, I've been so hurt in my last relationship. Oh, I don't know if I can make a commitment. It's like basically he's saying, you better tread carefully or I'm not going to be able to have a relationship or a commitment with you.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Where it's like basically you need to walk on eggshells and at any point I can say, well, that reminds me of my ex or, sorry, you failed. And I think that, women need to not fall for the kind of pity party that a guy's having and, say, okay, look, you're clearly not ready for a relationship. So, come find me when you are or don't.
Exactly. And then finally, he's the worst by association. So his friends are terrible and his exes are crazy.
Yes. I think that, obviously you don't want to rule out a guy just because you don't get along with his friends. But this goes beyond that. If, a guy, they're just downright scary, or they're just people that you wouldn't want to be around the rest of your life, you really need to take that into account. Most guys aren't going to be giving up their best friend for you. They're not going to be giving up the groups that they associate for you. And especially when this, this can also come into play with family. If you don't like a guy's family,
Mm-hmm.
like these are the people that are going to be around your children someday. And if you don't like them or you think that they are, not good people, then you do need to take that into account, especially if a long-term relationship is what you're after.
Yeah, and also the part about the crazy exes. I mean, as soon as someone said, my ex is crazy, then it's like, to me, that's a red flag. And then it means that you're probably crazy too because you're the one who dated her.
Exactly. I mean, it either means that, that yes, that the guy has a history of crazy and is addicted to kind of this drama. Or I think that especially if you're on a first date and somebody kind of comes out trashing their ex, it shows that they're a jerk, probably more than the ex is,
Mm-hmm.
if they're still talking about it.
Right. Exactly. So it's not a good sign when someone trashes their ex. The only thing you're supposed to really say is, well, it didn't work out, but he's a wonderful person.
Exactly. And you know what? If both people are comfortable with it, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, this is the type of person I used to be attracted to in the past. This is why it didn't work out. These are kind of the things that trigger me in a fight, and I know this because I used to fight about this with so-and-so. I think that can be very helpful, but that's when you're in a relationship stage. That's when you're starting to deal with conflict, and you're trying to resolve it, and you're using your history in a way that's constructive to your current relationship. But I think just kind of lamenting, oh, I only date crazy girls, or for girls, I only date, bad boys. It's like, okay, that says a lot more about you than it does about the people that you dated.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yes, there are way more red flags than the ones we talked about today. Your website is bigredflags.com, and you also have the Big Red Flags app. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, we launched the app in December of last year, and if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you can just type in Big Red Flags into your iTunes store, and it'll come up. And most of the components of the app are free. This is kind of a red flag of the week that pops up on your phone every week, as well as an opportunity to read the blog on your phone and read everybody's stories, as well as submit your own story. And then we also have a 99-cent paid upgrade where you can get advice from us through little message boards, as well as other users. We have some quizzes. We have a red flag fortune teller where you basically ask a question and shake your phone, which is kind of just a fun bells and whistle type thing. But it's really great. It's a good way for people who are fans of the blog or who want to just be able to read the blog on their phone to see a better format of it and kind of take it on the go.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being on. Again, the book is called The Little Black Book of Big Red Flags, Relationship Warning Signs You Totally Spotted but Chose to Ignore.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. All the best. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So we have a few minutes here, and I'm going to do my favorite segment, which I rarely do and which I should do more often, but I haven't. So here we go.
Celebrity Corner.
All right, so if you're a fan of Dancing with the Stars, and who isn't, you of course know who Mark Ballas is. And last week, TMZ got him in a video having a fight with his girlfriend. Now, he's about 25, and I think she's around the same age. So this was a 6-minute video of them arguing outside a club in the evening on Hollywood Boulevard. And it was just funny for me, anyways, as a dating and relationship expert, to see this because so many fights are unnecessary. And this was definitely an unnecessary fight, especially in public. I mean, is there ever really a reason to fight in public? I don't think so. And basically, the fight was over a scooter and smoking. It already sounds ridiculous, right? Because they had, they're dating, their boyfriend-girlfriend, and she had agreed to give up her scooter. I don't know why. And he had agreed to give up smoking. So they each gave up something for the other. And apparently her girlfriend saw him smoking and told her. And so she got upset. And so that's how this argument came about. And so I just find it interesting, you know, being older, now you see things differently. And an older woman would probably never have gotten into this situation, into this type of argument, because we wouldn't even have let it get this far. Because first of all, you know, if I'm riding a scooter and I'm start dating someone, he's like, well, I want you to stop riding your scooter. I'd be like, no, I want to ride my scooter. Why should I give it up, you know? And I would never ask someone to stop doing whatever they were doing, you know, smoking. You know, if I don't want to be with a smoker, then I won't date a smoker. And I'll tell him that. And if he says, okay, I'm going to stop, or I'm going to try to smoke, or I'm going to try to smoke, I'm going to try to stop, I'll be like, fine, or no, that's not fine. Or I might say, okay, if you want to smoke, fine, but don't do it around me. And we can come to that kind of agreement. But I'm not going to tell someone to stop smoking, and, you know, that's an addiction. Someone is not going to stop smoking generally from one day to the next. Most people can't quit cold turkey. So, you know, I would never do that. Okay, so, but let's say somehow, for some reason, I made that deal. And then if a girlfriend came to me and said, hey, I saw him smoking, I wouldn't get upset because I'd be like, of course, he's going to be sneaking a cigarette once in a while because it's an addiction. It's going to happen. I don't expect him to be perfect, so I wouldn't even have made a big issue out of it. But, when you're in your early 20s, everything's a big issue, right? And so one of the lines she said was, well, how am I supposed to trust you? You said you weren't going to smoke, and you smoked, and what else have you lied to me about? Your typical line, what else have you lied to me about? So they were just going back and forth, and at some point he got sick of it, and he came up with a great line. I don't know if he came up with it, but he said, you can cry me a river and swim in it for all I care. I'm like, what a brilliant line. And her response was, you're being mean to me right now. Do you like my interpretation of a 20-year-old being upset? You're being mean to me right now. That's how they sound, I think. I don't know. And when a woman says that, what she really means is you're not making an effort to understand where I'm coming from, and it feels as if you don't care. But, of course, she's not old enough to use those words, so she just goes to that default, you're being mean to me. And then, he took back his house key off her keychain and walked away, but then they end up leaving together that night and blah, all is well, blah, blah, blah. All is well, for now. This obviously isn't going to last. I mean, this is not the way to have a relationship, but I know there's a lot of arguments that go on like this all the time, and they're just so unnecessary. And so you avoid them by, first of all, not making agreements like the one that they made. You can't, a person has to change because they want to change, not because you told them to. So I would never try to change anyone. Like I said to Natasha during the interview, I said, I let a person do what they do, and then I'm going to do what I do. So if I don't want to be with a smoker, or if I don't want to be with someone who drinks, if I don't want to be with an alcoholic, then I'm just not going to date him. I'm not going to try to change him. That's where problems start. People are who they are, and they'll change when they're ready to change. So if instead of trying to change the guy, just change guys. Get another guy. Hey, what a concept. Get a guy who doesn't smoke, who doesn't drink, who doesn't do all that. But I don't think you should be changing for someone just to make them happy. Because then that's when you get upset afterwards. You're like, well, I changed for you. Well, I sacrificed for you. Well, maybe you shouldn't have. So love is not about sacrifice. I know most people think it is, but we want to be free. At our foundation, we want to be free, and when we don't feel free, that's when we get upset. And that's where a lot of problems come from, because people don't feel free. And even if you are in a relationship, you still need to feel some type of freedom in it. So that is it for this week. I would like to thank my guest, Natasha Burton, and the other two writers who could not be on the show today, Julie Fishman and Megan McCrary. The book, of course, Big Red Flags, Relationship Warning Signs You Totally Spotted but Chose to Ignore. Their website is bigredflags.com, and, of course, they have the app. You might want to check that app out. And my website is theartoflove.net, where you can sign up for my free weekly newsletter, and I have videos there. I have the latest news. I finally put up an interview I did last year, and I finally found out it came out in December. It was with it's in Spanish, so I hope you read Spanish. It's with El Mercurio in Chile. That's my latest update, in case you wanted to know. And there's a whole bunch of other things happening, so check out theartoflove.net. I also have my book, Lucia's Lessons of Love, and that is available at lessonsoflove.net. Of course, I have my Facebook page, which I love, and a shout-out to anyone who's listening from Facebook, and that's facebook.com/CougarExpert. So that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, remember that love inspires, empowers, uplifts, and enlightens.
You're listening to The Art of Love with your host, Lucia, right here on LA Talk Radio.